Today we're in lesson 26 of our Reading Adventures magazine here, and I'd like you to pull out your Reader's Adventures magazine and follow along with me. We're going to be looking at the poetry place today to start off, and it's pages 14 and 15. And our first poetry piece is called The Whale, and the second poetry piece is called Wild Geese. I'm going to read them aloud, and we're going to discuss them. The Whale by Douglas Florian. Big as a street, with fins not feet. I'm full of blubber, with skin like rubber. When I breathe out, I spew a spout. I swim by the shore and eat more and more. I'm very, very hard to ignore. I want to talk about a couple of things that you might notice in this poem. The first thing I think that I notice in this poem is rhyme. You can see that the end words in the stanzas rhyme. We have street and feet. We have blubber and rubber. And we have out and spout. And we have shore, more, and ignore. And those are examples of rhyme. The next thing that I think that stands out to me in this poem is rhythm. And oftentimes when we hear rhythm, we think about music. But rhythm is a common thread in a lot of poetry, and when you read a poem, oftentimes I ask kids to read a poem and they read it 2 times, and the reason that is sometimes after you read a poem, you can kind of get a rhythm or a beat. You can oftentimes create your own unique rhythm with poems too, but big as a street with fins not feet. You can feel in those that you can almost clap out the measures to feel the rhythm. And the last thing that I want to talk about is imagery. And when I talk about imagery with poetry, and specific to this lesson, I think that imagery is created in this poem without even seeing the title. What I mean by that is, when you read the poem, you're able to tell what animal that the poem is describing without even having to see the title. As big as a street with fins not feet. I'm full of blubber with skin like rubber. When I breathe out, I spew a spout. I swim by the shore and eat more and more. I'm very, very hard to ignore. And when you read that poem, you're able to tell that it's about a whale, and that's what we call imagery, providing a picture in your mind. Our next poem is on page 15, and it's called Wild Geese. When I watch their flock in flight, and when I hear their cries, I wonder how they always know their way through distant skies. One of the things you'll notice here again is we have rhyme. And this rhyme isn't line by line like it was in the last one. You'll notice that this rhyme happens within stanzas. And stanzas are kind of like the paragraph of poetry. And the first stanza here would be, when I watch their flock in flight, and when I hear their cries. And the next one would be, I wonder how they always know their way through distant skies. And we can see there that the rhyme is cries and skies. And you can also see that there's a little bit of rhythm depending on how you read it, but it has a nice flow to the poem. And this is another one where we can see imagery. Oftentimes when we hear about a flock in flight, and when we hear about birds making their way through distant skies, we can think about birds at the very least and migrating, but oftentimes wild geese, and we get to see that even here in Montana, which is kind of cool. We have a fun little animal match activity that you can do, and I do not want you to actually write in your books, so please make sure you don't do that. But our animal match activity says, in the article Animals on the Move, you read about the abilities and habits of many different animals. In the left column below is a list of animals mentioned in the article. The column on the right lists different animal characteristics. On a separate piece of paper, match each description to the animal it describes best. Review the article if you're not sure. So remember, you can always go back and look into Animals on the Move. And the animals that you're looking at are salmon, elephant, bat, and honeybee. And the characteristics that you're looking to match are A, making a rumbling sound that people cannot bear, B, moves in a zigzag motion, C, returns to its place of birth to spawn, and D, uses high-pitched squeaks to find its way. So I'd like you to take a minute and just figure those out on your own and match the characteristics up with the animals. Wild Similes is going to be our last ELA activity today, and it says, similes are comparisons that use the word like or as. A simile helps people understand something by comparing it to something else. In the poem The Whale, for example, the whale says that it is big as a street with skin like rubber. Create 2 or 3 similes about an animal mentioned in Animals on the Move, or about an animal of your choice. Use features from the chart below. Take turns reading your similes with a partner. So when you write your similes today, I want you to make sure that you keep all of your similes, and when we do our partner activity on Friday, that's going to be one of the things that you get to do is share your similes with your partner. I would like for you to go through and create a simile for each one of these features that's listed over here. And so I would like you to create a simile for size, and there's an example there, as tall as a tree. I'd like you to create a simile for texture, smooth as glass. I'd like you to create a simile for movement, racing like the wind. I'd like you to create your own simile for color, as black as ink, and your own simile for sound, cooing like a flute. So be thinking about similes. You have to write 5 similes of your own and have them ready for our Friday activity. You can just write them on a separate piece of paper if you like, or you can type them on your computer. It's up to you. I just want to make sure that you have them ready for our Friday afternoon partner activity. So your task now is to write 5 similes and use the features that are listed below.